Welcome to the YouTube channel of the San Diego Horticultural Society. My name is Karen England, and I'm the president of the SDHS, here to introduce you to the speaker and presentation topic that you are about to see. But first, if you are new to this channel and our organization, we are so glad that you are here. If you enjoy this recording, please visit the video description below to find links to our website, sdhort.org, with important information about how to join our group, upcoming meetings and events, and to read our renowned newsletter called Let's Talk Plants, written by the membership. Now, about our presenter. Greg Rubin was the San Diego Horticultural Society's 2018 Horticulturist of the Year, and he is the president and founder of California's own Native Landscape Design Company. He is a licensed landscape contractor who has been working in the California native plants arena since 1985. And he's here to talk about firescaping. Fire-resistant native landscapes are not an oxymoron, according to Greg. Greg is co-author with Lucy Warren of the book California Native Landscape, and published by Timber Press 2013, a popular native horticultural literary work that covers all aspects of native landscape design. He and Lucy published a second book, The Drought-Defying California Garden, also published by Timber Press in 2016. His website will be listed in the video description below, and it is calown.com. So without further ado, let's talk plants. Here's Firescaping with Greg Rubin.
Just kicked me right out. There it is. Okay, we're back.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. We're good. We're good. So the center section there burned again in 2001. You can see that clearly it's degraded severely. But then the foreground shot there burned again in 2003. There's nothing left. I mean, it's just nothing left. This is called the process of type conversion. Okay. And this kind of lays bare this idea that it needs to burn. If you burn it too much, you burn chaparral a couple times in 10 years, you lose the chaparral. That's a great way. In fact, the Spaniards knew this. The first thing they did, it was just like what they did in Europe, right? They hit our shores, immediately they started lighting fires, and they just let them burn themselves out, 1 million acres at a time. And as soon as the fire cooled down, they put cows on it and their hay that they brought from Europe. And that process worked great. It was a fantastical agricultural approach, all right? And that's when it all started. And so this process takes something that was beautiful and green like this and basically turns it into this, all right? California, unfortunately, a large portion of it is just a dried out, burned up hulk of its former beauty, okay? The Golden State, unfortunately, is just getting more golden. So that is the natural condition of chaparral, you know, having these dense, impenetrable stands that are prone to huge and intense fires, okay? That is a natural state of chaparral. It's not the fault of conservationists or so-called fire suppression policy. First off, try suppressing one of these fires. How's that working for you? Okay. All right, they just burn till they hit the ocean pretty much. You know, we've been able to save communities, and there's part of the strategy we're talking tonight that might help with that whole approach. But in general, they just keep going all the way to the ocean. And this is not like they try to paint this all the same kind of broad brush, but this is not like forest fires. The forest at the top of our mountains is a very different ecology than the chaparral on the western slopes, okay? Two different regimes, and you can't treat them the same, okay? So chaparral, the only thing that has saved chaparral, you guys, is fire suppression, okay? We put humans into this equation, guys, flicking their bits, all kinds of ignition sources that didn't exist before. And it's the only thing that's saved any of our chaparral with the 20% that's left. Yeah, most experts agree on a natural fire frequency of somewhere between 30 and 130 years. Okay, and you really, if you start burning any higher than that, you lose the whole ecosystem. Gone, period. And why is that? Well, think about it. Prior to human habitation here, they were going back 15,000 years. Well, our ecology is millions of years old. It long predates humanity as a species, okay? That's when this stuff was evolving, okay? So the indigenous part modified the landscape, but it did not have anything to do with its ecological, development. So you take humans out, what are your natural fire sources? Well, how about lightning, right? Did anybody say lightning?
Lightning.
How about lightning?
Lightning.
Wait, there's one more. Volcanoes. All right, you get my point. So how often do we have lightning storms during Santa Ana wind events? So it was a pretty rare confluence of factors that would allow a fire to be sparked during a summer thunderstorm and then to dwell long enough to finally be picked up by a Santa Ana wind event in fall, okay? That's why it was so infrequent. Now, once these lit up, you were off to the races, okay? These are massive fires that stopped at the ocean, and that's what our ecology is adapted to recovering from through a whole ecological succession process. But now with humans, it's burning like every 5 to 10 years. And like I said, indigenous folks definitely modified the landscape, but they weren't a part of its ecological evolution. So the vast majority of fires in modern times are human caused. What's the percent? 97 to 100% of all the fires in all the counties of California from 1919 to 2016 were human ignition. Just about every one of them. Okay, what's that tell you? Well, I want you to notice this picture. What are some of these common human ignition sources? Arson. Still a lot of sick people running around that get their jollies off lighting fires, and there's a lot of it in East County. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed in the news, but there's a lot of little fires that people are running around and lighting. Maybe people, maybe a person, I don't know. Electrical fires. I did a lot of the survey work for SDG&E after the 2007 fires. We estimated we lost between 10 and 100,000 mature Engelmann oak trees. Never to be seen again. Okay, and these were mostly started by power lines, parking. Nowadays, SDG&E actually clears about a 10-foot radius circle around all their power poles. And as much as I hate to see potential loss of habitat due to this, I think it's a very responsible thing to do, and I think it is helping to save ignition, prevent ignition during windstorms. Smoking, believe it or not, there's still people that smoke. Can you believe it? You know, looking their cigarettes out. This is huge. Okay. Sparking landscape equipment. Ironically, usually occurring when they're out there mowing and remediating for fire. This picture was taken less than a mile from my office 2 weeks ago. Gee, how did that fire start? Can anybody guess? Well, of course, they have this flow mower out and they hit a rock. Boom, spark, off to the races, grass fire, right? Because it's grass, it's not native, it's a flashy fuel, and the whole thing goes up simultaneously. I guess they were able to pull the thing out of the fire, but the damage was already done. And I tell people, please, 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 if you're out there mowing dry grass in the middle of summer, have a hose nearby, have some 5-gallon buckets of water so you can douse this thing out when it inevitably hits a rock and sparks, okay? This is one of the most common causes of fires nowadays, believe it or not. Burning trash. There was some guy back in 98, 99, decided to burn trash at his house near Lake Henshaw in the middle of the Santa Ana wind event and burned down half of Palomar Mountain. That was the Pumashaw fire. Common sense. Cars, bad catalytic converters. You'd even think that somebody is throwing ignition devices out because it's very regular, but in fact, it's a catalytic converter on its last legs, literally spitting its guts out. Have you ever seen that? The sparks are coming out of the exhaust there, or chains, sparking chains like a safety chain on a trailer that's dragging along and just creating fireworks as you go. And believe it or not, children playing with fire, they still do. A lot of our 2014 fires were caused by a 13, 14-year-old girl running around North County lighting fires. So lots of diverse human-caused reasons for fires. So how do we prepare for fire? How do we create defensible space? Well, usually these strategies involve a zonal approach. And the first one actually we call zone 0. This is new. Zone 0 is usually 0 to 5 feet from the house. Zone 1 or A, depending on what fire district you're in, is usually the next 30 to 50 feet. And then zone 2 or B is usually the next 50 to 70 feet or even more. And really, zone 0 is newly designated. And basically what we're trying to do there is keep flammable materials out from under the eaves. So we typically achieve this with aprons, gravel, DG, in this case concrete, save this house, all right? We'll talk about this a little more, but this fire was so hot that the lawn actually burned. And this streak of metal there was once a water tank. All the neighbors surrounding our client's home burned to the ground, unfortunately. And also notice they do have a patio overhead, but it's all metal, okay? So that's a very important aspect too. But definitely these aprons, boy, work wonders. Yes, that's the thing with this slideshow is I actually have pictures of real burned landscapes, okay? Yeah, this one survived. This was our very first attempt at doing an apron. I think we installed this 2001, 2002, and it came through the cedar fire in 2003 with flying colors. In fact, this was one of the properties that was in our Navy study. And nowadays I wouldn't put mulch in here. I'd just run the gravel all the way out. But even this little apron there worked great. It kept the flames out from under the eaves. And these are all the original plantings from 20 years ago. This is a new installation we just finished end of June, early July. This is out in, you know where Harbison Canyon is? Near Alpine or Crest? That's where we're working. This place is completely surrounded by beautiful chaparral, slopes going right up to the backyard. Chaparral is so pristine, it's full of, you native people appreciate this, Ceanothus cyaneus. One of our most beautiful and rarest of ceanothuses. Also Bahiopsis or Vigera, which is our San Diego marguerite. Really beautiful, beautiful chaparral surrounding this home. Well, the neighbors, they just mowed everything down to bare ground. Horrible erosion, bare dirt, thinking that they've done the right thing and they're going to prevent fire. Well, you're going to see something to the contrary here in a minute. But anyway, this is a really good example of that zone 0. This is a 5-foot apron all the way around the house. It's not unattractive, and it keeps stuff out from under the eaves here, and it kind of gives you access too, right? And So fire department loves this. It's worked really well in real fires, so we highly recommend it. Now, zone 1 or A, outside of that 5-foot zone. So these zone 0 and zone 1 are the most critical, the most crucial to defensible space. And when the fire department comes through ahead of the fire, they actually make a conscious decision. They make an assessment and say, okay, I can defend that property, I can't defend that property. Because they're incredibly courageous and professional, but they don't necessarily want to give their lives trying to save somebody's property, okay? So they do look at these defensible zones and see if they're truly defensible. So in zone 1 or A, usually the next 30 to 50 feet, we're often doing a lot of hardscape. In this case, it was a desert landscape with gravel mulch. This fire came through here and it was totally unscathed, totally untouched. Also, the home itself doesn't have a lot of places to carry flame because it's sort of a Santa Fe structure. And one of the issues you run into in this first zone are spot fires. Spot fires, you know, it's not usually a wall of flame, this huge flame front coming through like Niagara Falls of flame. No, it's actually usually spot fires coming ahead of the leading edge there and being wind driven, okay? So spot fires could be flying embers. They unfortunately can also be burning animals. That's actually something people don't like to talk about. It's not pleasant, but yes, you may have a squirrel or a rabbit on fire that runs underneath that pile of wood, that pile of firewood piled up against the back of your house, okay? You don't also want wooden structures against your house, okay? These are the kinds of things that spot fires can ignite. Fences, wooden fences. Talk about hot and high. Wooden fences actually burn very intensely, very hot, and can wick that fire right towards your house. Now, that's usually still a defensible situation, except for the fences that then turn 90 degrees into your house. Usually at the side where the garage is, you have a gate there. If you have a wooden gate and a wooden fence contacting your house, boy, that's dangerous. Because again, you get this coming right into the house, right under the eaves, lighting up the rafters, and you're off to the races, okay? Much better to use stucco walls and metal gates, something inflammable, because you just don't want to wick this stuff right into the house. And also, again, don't pile up wood and debris or have wooden sheds, closets against the house, okay? I mean, it's a very localized approach, but it really is effective. You know, when you're designing for fire resistance, you actually want to work from the house out, not the landscape in, okay? So just eliminating ignition sources right around the house can be a huge factor in saving it. Also in the zone 1 or A, we usually have permanent irrigation. This is often where you'll have your lawns. Well, in this case, we don't usually do sod lawns anymore. We like to use grass substitutes. This is one called field sedge. This is actually here in La Jolla. I expected to go back and take photographs of this beautifully manicured La Jolla lawn, but instead they liked the meadowy look of the field sedge so much that they didn't mow it. They liked it the way it was, and I think I have to agree, it's kind of pretty. And Carex fragricilis is what it's called. It makes a wonderful lawn substitute, and we plug it in like a bad hair transplant about every 12 days. And this is less than a year after installation. It's filled in nicely. But you can also mow it too. And you could run all over it, and the kids can play on it, so can the dogs. It's very tough. Only uses probably half the water of a sod lawn. It even smells like a lawn when you mow it. It's really funny. Okay, then zone 2, outward of that, is that next 50, 70, 100, 150 feet, you know, depending on what the conditions are and local ordinances. But in general, it's this 50 to 70 foot zone. And you have a couple things that can potentially go on there. You may have existing native vegetation in that zone, which you modify. We'll talk about that. Or you might actually have nothing but weeds and you want to landscape it, and we recommend landscaping natives and are lightly hydrated. So we'll talk about that. That's where we've had all of our success. So site hygiene is everything, okay? Getting rid of those flashy fuels, non-native grasses and weeds. And by the way, the oaks will actually thank you too, because that's a rare Engelmann oak tree that's in full bright yellow bloom. Pretty rare sight indeed. All 40 of these mature oaks on this 10-acre property went into bright yellow bloom when we cleaned it up. It's an ecological switch, weeds and natives, so they can reward you. This is how that site looked before we cleaned it up. Boy, is that ready to burn. In fact, the only thing that's native in this are these oak trees in the right there. The rest of this, everything else you see, you know, out to the hill there are non-native plants, weeds. Now here's a good example of site hygiene in an actual fire. It's the Cedar Fire, 2003. This was a Mission manzanita. You wouldn't even know a fire came through except for that burned out deadwood knot in the base of the trunk. The tree itself was completely hydrated, happy, healthy, looked fine, no singeing, nothing. But what had the homeowner done? The homeowner had gone through and removed all the weeds. The only thing left were just the natural duff layer that forms, and that smolders. So it did ignite that little deadwood knot, but the tree itself was perfectly fine and hydrated because the weeds weren't stealing all the moisture and compromising its health. Okay? Site hygiene is very important. This is also a really important concept right here to prevent what we call fire laddering. So what we try to do is we try to maintain a space of about 3 times the height of the understory vegetation to the bottom branches of a tree, okay? So let's say your buckwheats are 18 inches tall, then this little gap in between is about 4.5 feet. So the total from the base would be 6 feet to the first branches there. Very effective, extremely effective. And eliminating fire ladders is really important, and that's a great way to do it. Maintain that separation. Thinning of existing vegetation. Actually, studies have shown that you don't need to thin more than about 40 to 50%. What does that look like? Well, it kind of looks like that, all right? And the branches that we remove, we actually mulch up and put right back down on the site. Because why? Because when you open it up, what wants to come in those spaces? Weeds, lots of weeds. So the mulch retains the ecology and also helps discourage the weeds. And you open up these chaparral forests that are impenetrable, you can basically turn it into a beautiful, mature native landscape. I mean, you're talking $100,000 to $200,000 an acre to install a new landscape, and yet people will come into existing chaparral and bulldoze it and create a weed patch. Why not work with it and prune it up, thin it out, put paths in it, benches, bird baths, plant perennials along the edges of the paths, okay? It's a park just sitting there. I mean, you can have it all, man. If I were buying property and I had existing chaparral, I would consider myself very lucky. Okay, that saved me $100,000 to $200,000 an acre in landscaping costs, and it's beautiful and established and perfect habitat. Here's another example. This is out in eastern Ramona. This shows about a 50% thin manzanita forest. Okay, it's beautiful. Okay, Cal Fire loved this. They came out there, they thought it was like an example to show everybody. That's why I have a slideshow. It was actually another property that's part of our study. And that's what that looks like, guys. All right? You don't have to be afraid of it. This really works, okay? And because, and our study helped prove this, because of the thinned out vegetation, moisture is used more efficiently, and actually the reserved moisture is used by less plants, less plant material, and so there's more available for the individual shrubs, and so they stay better hydrated. But when we're installing landscapes, especially, we really recommend using this overhead irrigation. We love MP rotators. It's just like Gentle Rainstorm. It's a local company too, so I try to support local. And they're sort of the innovators too. And this is great stuff. This is a way that we've been watering natives for 25, 30 years, and it's been fantastic. We're even experimenting with taking existing, in this case, coastal sage shrub, and just lightly irrigating it. It's not dying, it's not sick, it actually looks wonderful. It's not overgrowing, okay? It's just nicely hydrated. We water it maybe 2 or 3 times a month, very lightly, maybe 1/4 inch of rainfall. And look how nicely hydrated they are, but they're healthy. And compare it to the, dormant coastal sage scrub behind it. Which one's gonna burn more, And when we do an installation like this house, we built a road all the way around, a 12-foot wide road. The customer was horrified at first, but later grew to love their country lane. But in fact, it has the practical purpose of creating access, creating a fire break. Within that 75 to 100-foot zone, we've got lightly hydrated native plantings, okay? And then within zone 1 or A, we actually put a wall around it, and you have regular watered plants within that walled area, a couple of sycamores too, and a lot of flagstone, okay? So, it's kind of a zonal approach, and it works really well. We also put decomposed granite aprons all the way around this house, 8-foot wide decomposed granite aprons. And if you look at the native plantings, they're spaced out, they're well maintained, they're healthy, you get light irrigation. That's how to do it, folks. Well, how do I know this? Because this house has actually been through now 4 wildland fires and come through with flying colors. Also notice the roof on that, the metal roof. The embers hit and just fall off. So this is what it's like in the Firestone, okay? It's like the fire falls of Yosemite going sideways at 70 miles an hour and 0 humidity. And the US Navy had heard about our success, and people go, why would the US Navy be interested? Well, they administer hundreds of thousands of acres of naval housing, which is right on these wildland urban interfaces, okay? And so they see somebody that basically has had great experience with landscapes that look good all year long, that use very little water, they're great erosion control, they're low maintenance, they're fantastic habitat, which they're very interested in. And oh, by the way, they're fire resistant. That got their attention. So they awarded us an actual research grant to look at this phenomenon and why we have yet, knock wood, to lose a house, all right? 24 or so fires. And most of the anecdotal stuff out there is just, it's actually more destructive than if you've done nothing at all. Very destructive environment. So we came up with this ecologically sustainable fire risk reduction program. And I chose as my co-principal investigator, Dr. John Keeley, who's one of the world's foremost fire ecologists. And I was honored that he was willing to work with us on this, and he designed the experiment. And those were our goals, to develop a real science-based fuel management strategy, which was the first. And it needed to be ecologically sustainable, low water, low maintenance, all the things we just talked about. And then we took that data and we entered into something called fuel and fire tools. And that's modeling software because people are actually a little loath to have you lighting fires on their property. So the next best thing, this stuff requires a supercomputer to run it. And it's very accurate and really was a wonderful tool. So the selection criteria for the homes that we studied, they all had to be located on the wildland urban interface and had survived a major fire event, okay? All of them had to have a lightly irrigated planted native landscape, thin chaparral according to typical 40 to 50% prescriptions, and also a control area of unmodified chaparral. And on each of these properties, we set up weather stations, soil moisture gauges, and we took samples and dried them and measured the actual moisture content in each of these regimes. So we took all this data, the weather too, and combined it into the software. And what it yielded really surprised John. John said these results, not only did they support what you guys are doing, they're far beyond any expectation that I had in their consistency and their power. So it's like, wow, okay. So if I boil it down, the bottom line is the dotted line are the irrigated plantings. The dashed line are the thin chaparral, and the solid line are the controls. And in every case, the rate of fire spread was slowest for the irrigated plantings, followed not far behind by actually the thin chaparral. So this is the first time that science actually showed that thinning was really effective as a tool. And that relationship remained regardless of slope, okay, and regardless of wind speed. In every case, you still have the best results with your irrigated plantings, followed by the thin, followed by the controls, okay? So this is the first time anybody's actually looked at this scientifically, and it was really great to have it bear out what we are, our protocol. So that's basically what it said. The rate of fire spread was lowest for irrigated native plantings, followed by thin, followed by control. Apparent regardless of slope angle and wind speed. Native plants maintain much higher live fill moisture content than traditional plants on less water. And the evergreen natives, like Ceanothus, Bacchus, Manzanitas, maintain the highest levels of live fuel moisture content. And then lower growing natives exhibit even better fire behavior. And then you also had all the other great benefits of native landscape, which I've already iterated. So what's the bottom line on a lot of this? Well, whenever I give these talks, everybody expects me to have my top 40 favorite native fire-proof plants, right? Well, it doesn't work that way. Some of the worst fire bombs actually benefit the most from that little bit of supplemental irrigation that we do. It's all about hydration. Let me repeat, it is all about hydration. It is not about plant lists, okay? Thank God in San Diego County, we're starting to get away from the approved plant lists, all right? It's about hydration. We even did this little experiment years ago, very non-scientific, but we just tried to burn some stuff. I had to burn some native chaparral plants. We got about a quarter inch of rainfall the week before, and we couldn't get any of it to really sustain flame, not even the sage. I mean, we even piled everything together. We couldn't get that to burn, right? But then what happens when you add dead, dry weeds to the mix? Boom. If you notice, when you see firefighters out there lighting backfires, they're not trying to light the chaparral, which is actually quite difficult to ignite. No, they're lighting up the grass and the weeds, okay? And that allows the fire to build an intensity and duration to finally start to ignite the chaparral to create the backfire. So this is the worst of all situations, to have a disturbed site that somebody's gone in doing their fire protocols, they think, and you end up with a mix of native plants and weeds. That is the most volatile, scary situation there is, because the weeds are flashy combustible fuels, and the natives are dehydrated and unhealthy. And there's a lot of dead limbs, and so they're just raring to burn. So there's different approaches on these zones. If you're, to leave it bare and unplanted is not a good option. A lot of people like to use ice plant, right? I mean, a lot of us who grew up in the 60s, that's all we use. A back slope ice plant, later red apple, right? Maybe you want to use drought tolerant non-native plants, succulents, not bad. Or maybe natives. That's what I do. And they all have advantages and disadvantages. If you look at ice plant, for instance, yeah, it's cheap, it's readily available. Quick fill, it's green. Disadvantages, it is lousy erosion control. Very non-mycorrhizal plant, poorly mycorrhizal. That's what really stabilizes slopes, guys. I've seen plenty of situations where a hillside came down, and there's just ripples of beautiful ice plant on top of the dirt, okay? They do need a lot of water to really maintain that level of hydration. They're invasive, as those along the coast have known. Kind of boring and downright ugly. And they can form thatches that burn. I repeat, they can form thatches that burn. This picture was taken Saturday. This is a fire off Sweetwater Road. What is burning there, guys? That's right, ice plant. Ice plant. And look at where it's burned. There's nothing, it's bare soil, okay? And here's the close-up, okay? That stuff is burning. Ice plant burns. Red apple burns, okay? Why? It's so full of water, right? Well, you get this thatch going, and all that water boils off. And then what's left, a little bit that's left, burns, okay? Seen it time and time and time again. Even in the 2014 fires in Carlsbad, beautiful big circles of burning red apple, okay? So yeah, this came off of On Scene TV, 9/11 videos on YouTube. Did a big tap. So here's another, drought tolerant natives, non-natives and succulents are not a bad option. Okay, they're beautiful, easier to find. I mean, why should something native be so exotic? But that's kind of what we're dealing with. They need about twice the water we've found empirically to maintain that level of hydration. So whereas natives are good about once every 2 weeks inland, Mediterraneans want about once a week, once every 5 to 7 days for like ground cover rosemary, lavender. They're not bad at slope stabilization, much better than ice plant, not quite as good as the natives. Definitely a higher maintenance because these plants, they're very colorful, but they do require some cleanup and some deadhead. They don't have quite the wildlife value of the plants that our birds and butterflies actually evolved with. So that leaves us with natives. Well, it's much less water required to achieve those levels of hydration. That soil biology, that mycorrhizal fungal soil biology is very soil stabilizing. It also stores water, makes water available to them in a fire. Yeah, evergreen natives, like Ceanothus, Man's native, they're virtually no maintenance. Yeah, the worst thing you can do is actually fertilize and then the soil on this thing. Want to use good mulch instead. Great habitat. And like I said, it lends a sense of regional identity. We're forgetting what San Diego looked like. We're so busy turning it into South Florida. An interesting point, at about 70% canopy coverage, it actually has its own natural weed inhibition, which is kind of cool. You've been hiking in healthy chaparral, it's clean as a whistle. There's not as many suppliers out there, although that's changing. And they really don't like ornamental horticulture at all. And they don't do as well on drip irrigation. I know Nan loves drip, and they do a lot better on netafim than the single point emitters, but I still like to go overhead for a lot of reasons. Yeah, the mulch. So up north, they're getting the kind of fires that we got 20 years ago. And they're panicking. And I understand it completely. It's scary. they're losing huge swaths of land to fire, but I wish they would just take a step back and maybe listen to some of us in Southern California that have had this experience. Mulch is one of the most misunderstood components to a healthy native landscape. Okay? And for the native plant communities that want organic leaf litter, mulch, we found that shredded redwood bark is just by far the best stuff. Up north, unfortunately, they're banning it as fast as they can. They think this stuff is just an incredible fire hazard. Well, the key is you have to, and that's one of the other reasons that we want overhead water that needs to be consolidated, which happens rather rapidly with the natural watering cycle. Whoa, what did I hit? Sorry, guys. That was crazy. Sorry. Wow, let me,
You got excited.
I know, right? I talk, do I talk with my hands? I think I do. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. What did I do? Oh my God. I just ran this thing back. I'm going. We're getting there.
It was a nice refresher.
There we go. Yeah, right. Yeah, review now.
Yes.
We'll test now. We'll do the top three. There we go. Yay. Sorry. Shredded redwood bark, gorilla hair. It goes from about 3 to 4 inches thick down to about 1 inch in a matter of a few months with the watering. It will stick to 1.5 to 1 slopes. Okay. But you gotta water it down. It holds it in place and it packs it down to the point where it's very poorly oxygenated. That's the key, oxygenation. Okay, I even had City of Encinitas run fire tests on it. They couldn't even sustain the flame on it. He goes, Rubin, what kind of fire retardant do you put in this stuff? I said, no, it's redwood. So also they ask me all the time, what about oak leaf litter? Much better to leave it in place and have a hydrated, weed-free, healthy oak tree than to yank it out of there, have a weedy mess, a compromised oak tree that is ready to burn, okay? Yes, that oak leaf litter can develop some flame height, but if it were a real problem, you were burning up oak trees, how would you have oak forests if you didn't, you know, in the days gone by, right? So you're much better just leaving nature to itself, unless you're within about 5 feet of the house. Then we keep that zone clear under the eaves, all right? For the rest of it, we're okay with. Just leave it, and you can even help it by planting appropriate understory plants that help provide carbohydrates for the oak tree, and then the oak tree is the hydraulic pump for the plant community, bringing up water and spreading it to the associated plants through that mycorrhizal pump. That's what that landscape looked like 14 months later, okay? The stuff fills in fast, and it's beautiful, and this community in Aviara in Carlsbad love their new native landscape. And these oak trees went from near death to pushing out 3 feet of growth a year. They had been deeded in with that property. They could not be removed, okay? We got rid of the Japanese honeysuckle and the red apple. They said, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, that was actually showing some of the, by public request, I actually listed the plants that were in that plant right there. Okay, the last part of the presentation are case histories. Yeah, burn, baby, burn. This is actually stuff that really were in fire. What happened? And you don't want to be like this guy. You don't want to end up like him, right? Look at that roof. I think this was Scripps in the Cedar Fire. I think he actually lived.
Oh, good.
That was a good thing. Yeah. So here's some of the fires that our landscapes have gone through: the Pumishaw and Mount Palomar, the Pines Fire in Julian, the helicopter hit the power line, the Cedar Fire. Everybody remembers that one? The Witch Creek, especially you Poway and Bernardo people. The Harris Fire down near Harbison Canyon there. Hidden Meadows, even some kids playing with fire first lit up the whole mountain, and it stopped at my neighbor's back. Neighbor, that's my client. And of course, the fire marshal test. So we've got a pretty good little set of data we're working with here. Yeah, Cedar Fire, 2003. This is that dreaded redwood mulch. You can see that not all of it burned, some of it didn't burn. I want you to notice these red marker flags, those plastic flags. This is a real serendipitous picture because those marker flags are actually put in before the fire. And you couldn't have designed the experiment better, frankly, because we also had scorch marks. So you could see just how high that dreaded redwood bark actually burned, about 2 inches. There wasn't even enough heat to melt the flag. Well, this one melted a little bit because of the burning garden hose, okay? Not because of the mulch. Even you can see sections of mulch that actually aren't even burning. Nowadays, I wouldn't run the mulch up to the street line. I'd have that zone 0 going with the gravel or concrete, but be that as it may, it was very serendipitous. There's the back of the house. Again, areas that are not burned, areas that are burned, flags everywhere, totally unmelted. Lots of hardscape at the back of the house. I did have some plantings under the eaves there. Probably wouldn't do that much anymore, although they're actually kind of thinking about that zone 0 and whether it isn't, you absolutely have to have no vegetation. I think you can get away with some like monkey flowers and things like that there. That didn't mean that this house almost didn't burn, okay? Because right here in the corner, the husband and wife got into a huge fight a couple weeks before the cedar fire came through because he had a cord of firewood stacked there. Thank God she won the argument. So he took that cord of firewood and moved it over by the propane tanks. Also, you know, this house is hardened, okay? It's the modern architecture that really is doing the most to save homes. Tile roofs, plugged off tile runs, screened over vents, double pane glass windows with metal frames, not vinyl, okay? Vinyl melts and the windows just collapse in. But there was another problem with this house, and that was at this back door right here, where they had the wicker furniture. Had nothing to do with the landscape. That wicker furniture caught on fire with about a 7-foot flame height. And one of the neighbors had resisted the order to evacuate and came over and got CAL FIRE. They came over, they actually busted down the door, tore out the drywall on the other side and saved the house. And they were really in the cedar fire. This is the view out their back door. Okay, that's they're in the middle. This is the Witch Creek fire. People ask me, what's pretty fire resistant? Well, there's only a few plants that get called truly fire resistant in and of themselves, and they still need water, but that wild grape did pretty well, I'd say. As green as the day they planted it, okay? You wouldn't even know a fire came through except for this incinerated Ficus benjamina, but also notice the overhead. You see any wood? Masonry and steel. And this is a great photo for showing relative hydration levels. The black smudge is ground cover rosemary. The shrub next to it is buckwheat that's seeded in, which is getting watered about once every 2 weeks in summer. And clearly not enough to hydrate the rosemary, but the buckwheat still have green leaves all over it. Okay. And that's just a real kind of empirical observation. Relative hydration, same irrigation. And again, mistake planting right under the eaves here, but you can see that with the hydration, they didn't burn hot enough to even scorch the paint. Okay, so again, wouldn't tempt fate like this, but still kind of serendipitous as far as the investigation. Of course, at the back, they have that concrete apron. This is also in rangeland, Ramona. And this landscape, again, lightly hydrated, all native. And didn't generate enough heat to burn that wooden deck at the back of their house. All this is alive, by the way. It's just singed, scorched. Here's the same landscape 3 years later. All right, same plants, happy with the plant. Ready to take on another fire. And here, There are people that cleared for hundreds of feet around their home. The homes are gone. Massive environmental devastation. I mean, like this guy here, he cleared 300 feet around his house, just like the insurance company wanted him to do. Well, where's the house? So, smoldering ashes surrounded by green queen palms. Well, the old aerospace engineer in me kicked in and realized very quickly what was going on here. When you remove all vegetation around a home, you create a wind tunnel. You create laminar flow. There is literally nothing to create turbulence in those flows of pyroclastic flows of hot ash. It's just streaming in there. It's accelerating when it gets closer to the soil. What's the only thing that's going to stop those flows? Your house. Not a hard concept. Well, Rick Halsey put it this way: you create the perfect bowling alley for embers. Okay. So cleared all the way around, destroyed some incredibly beautiful chaparral habitat. House is gone. All right. So the moral of this story is clearing can actually cause more problems than solve. Same here.
They're saying that they're having a hard time hearing you, so just stay
Oh,
close.
sorry.
That's okay. Stay
Sorry,
closer.
guys out there. I get very animated, you tell. All right, so I'll keep facing because I turn away, don't I?
Yes.
Sorry, guys. I have no self-awareness. Anyway, same issue here. Cleared, 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 $1 million homes gone. Yet, here's a native landscape, the Harris fire, and the fire didn't even burn the mulch. It actually split, went around the house, went around the yard, joined up again, went right up Lawson Peak. I mean, it doesn't get any starker than this, all right? Lightly irrigated native landscape, $100,000 solar array, beautiful house, all saved, and unirrigated native chaparral. This guy called me, his neighbor called me also, who I helped with their landscape. Both of them said the same thing: Rubin, your landscape saved my home. That's a call that you like to get, okay? And then the final thing here is what you do after fires, right? A lot of people have this situation where they have a drainage swell coming up to the back of their house. And how do you deal with that, right? Well, the worst thing you can do is seed. Seeding after a fire is it's not recommended. Not recommended. And especially, you know what's worse? Ryegrass. Ryegrass that everybody was taught as kids to use is absolutely environmentally devastating. There's something about the biochemistry of ryegrass that is especially bad and wipes out native ecology forever. Okay, how do we deal with these? Well, we do cross fencing. We just take some T-posts, put them in across the gully, weave your dead branches across, let the water come through, but hold the debris. And I do this maybe every 20 feet or so, and they're called debris dams. Works really great. And then you do some sandbagging around the house to kind of direct the water, and you're done. You don't seed. They seeded here. You can see it was aerial seeded. You see how the streaks are going across? That was ryegrass, 1985. It is still not grown back. You can still see these stripes where the madrones and manzanita used to grow on Cuesta grade. Okay, that's how bad it is. And what good are you doing? How are you helping the erosion situation when it takes 2 or 3 good rains just to germinate the stuff, right? It piles of dirt at the bottom with ryegrass coming out of it. This is how it should have been left. This is what happens when you just let the ecology recover on its own. This was in Del Dios in 2008. Everybody's running to on the Borrego. We've got this unbelievable show in Escondido. I mean, unbelievable. Gorgeous, okay? No seeding, just allowed to come back on its own. Even the landscapes came back. Fortunately, this was a site that was seeded. Star thistle, ripgut brome, mustard, okay? Soon that oak tree is going to be dead in the background, okay? This is Armageddon. This is what we're turning California into, guys. We gotta stop messing with it. There's how it should look. You'll even see glass on the soil because of the melted silica of the soil. And then a year later, the wildflowers popping up. Finally, 5 years later, well on a rebound. That's the end of the talk. Thank you very much.
We'll take questions from the audience, and also, can you say in there, the Zoom can put
Yes,
in the chat?
Zoom, if you want to put your questions into chat, we'll give you the answers.
Raise your hands if you have any questions in the room.
Well, you guys know it all.
Greg,
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. So
tell them what the question is.
There's a local company that manufactures the type of sprinkler heads that we love to use. And that local company, most of you are familiar with, is Hunter Irrigation. They're in San Marcos. And the MP rotators, I tested some of the first prototypes 25 years ago. It was like manna from heaven, a perfect way to water native landscapes. Gentle rainfall, about 0.4 inches of equivalent precipitation an hour. So you're running 20 to 40 minutes, you put down a quarter inch of rain. It's just perfect, especially for those steep slopes too. Yes. So the question is, where do we purchase that shredded redwood bark? And we have a number of suppliers here. I'm up in Escondido in North County, so I know the suppliers up there, including Great Soils in Escondido, also Southwest Boulder carries it. I think KRC Rock can get it. A1 Topsoils in Mira Mesa, Kearney Mesa area. And I think RCP may even be able to get this stuff. It's actually becoming quite popular. We were the first to use it in Southern California. It's really, people are realizing what great stuff it is. Yes. Do I have a preferred grind? You know, I usually am using single grind, honestly. And it goes a lot farther too, I find, it lasts longer. So usually a single grind. You can get a double grind, which is a much finer product. Yeah.
we have a question on Zoom. Can you speak to using wood chips as mulch water retention for new native plantings if shredded redwood isn't an option for the budget?
Yeah, shredded redwood is expensive, although its longevity pays for itself because of the lack of, you don't have to replace the material and you don't have to extend the labor doing it. And it also sticks to very steep slopes. So it does have a bit of a return on investment. However, you know, probably the best stuff would be very clean arborist trimmings. The best would be chipped pine and oak. With a lot of chips, not necessarily leaves as much as actually chipped wood. And actually chipped eucalyptus isn't that bad, as long as it's lower in leaf content. Mainly the wood being chipped up, that works pretty well. So most of your clean arborist trimmings are okay, except no palm. You can avoid it, no pepper trees. Pepper trees are like green death. I tell you, they just want to kill everything around, search and destroy, especially with native plants, because the native ecology is very complex and delicate. Pepper trees are anything but. But yeah, you can go with those as alternatives.
Is there in the room? I've got another on Zoom if there isn't. Oh, Scott.
Question, Scott? Why no palm? Because it's very fibrous. Palms are basically modified grasses. It's actually a very, very different tropical-based ecology and would encourage that kind of soil ecology. Okay, it would work against sort of the type of mycorrhizal fungi that would be best for coastal sagebrush chaparral.
Charles.
So, most of your greenways places will not allow pollen. They actually treat it as trash. Yes, it just gums up its shippers and it just comes out as a mess, like a tangled mess.
Okay, I've got a couple here on Zoom. First one is, if you bought a home that has some well-established eucalyptus surrounding the house, is there hope for removing even very well-established eucalyptus?
Well, you can remove anything. It just, so when you're trying to remove well-established eucalyptus, you got to be very careful and do what you're lashing so you don't make sure that something doesn't end up falling on the house that's very heavy and destructive. Not all eucalyptus are the same. Citriodora, what are they calling it now? It's a new, starts with C. They have a new genus now. It's not eucalyptus anymore, but the citrus, the white bark is actually very benign. I can plant natives all day under it, no problem. It's a lovely tree. It's kind of like a big sycamore, almost an evergreen sycamore. But yeah, you want to take it down in sections. Probably need to kill the stump near the house because the mechanical removal might destroy the foundation. But definitely possible to do.
Great. This is another question. Sorry. SDG&E notified me today that they have wildfire fuels modification program, but seems that they want to get rid of low-lying plants. Can you help them understand?
I've been fighting these battles for 30 years, you guys. It's like I don't even have any energy left. And none of it's based on science, but the thinning, we're showing that the 40 to 50% thinning is effective, but that doesn't mean taking out all your understory shrubs. Instead, we maintain that separation at 3 times the height of the understory to the lower limbs, okay, lower canopy. And that's been very effective in actual fires, okay? So some really nasty things have been done, unfortunately, in the name of fire prevention. A lot of the protocols are not scientifically proven nor recommended. You often create more problems than doing nothing at all.
Any more questions in the room? All right. Got another one online. Are potted plants under eaves a fire hazard?
Honestly, you know, I think they're starting to re-examine this no vegetation at all under the eaves. And so being that it's a potted plant, it's well hydrated, it's a ceramic pot, I wouldn't have a problem with it, honestly. Just keep it open. Don't put a masked plant in, you know, knot it up like we'll want to do sometimes.
Sure. Okay. If you all are done, I think the onliners are done too. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. It's an honor to come here. Thank you. I love coming here. You guys are like family. Thank you.
He has books and he's going to go back there and you can buy books. I'm going to come by. Don't pack up. Yeah. So, all right. And we'll see everyone in September.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.